Okay, and you will see that this is kind of roughly what your paper's gonna look like. It might look yours is going to look slightly different because this time there's a cover sheet which all the departments in school have to use. But next year in your GCSEs, this is sort of what your front page of your GCSE papers will look like, with instructions, etc. Abdi asked, what's History B GCSE? That's just because our exam board is OCR B. OCR have two different types of History GCSE, OCR A, OCR B, which is a slightly harder version, basically. We do OCR B because you're all too clever for History A. So ours is OCR B, basically. Okay. So first thing we're going to do, or first thing you will see, sorry, in your papers is 3 questions like this, right, that you've already had a go at this morning. The first one asks you to identify one official, that means government, remember, response to migrants in modern Britain. Hands up if you can answer that. Jacob. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. They invited migrants. We could talk about them inviting migrants from the Caribbean, couldn't we? But they invited migrants to rebuild Britain. Yeah, brilliant. In actual fact, this question is really super easy, isn't it? Because you could talk about all sorts of things. Basically, any law that the government introduced, you can talk about here. So the Aliens Act in 1905, you could talk about the Immigration Act in 1971, the Commonwealth and Citizenships Act in 1948. Go on. It says modern Britain. Yeah, exactly. So they're anything after 1900. So does Brexit count? Yep, absolutely. So anything after 1900 is what modern means, okay? So yeah, that's a lovely one. Second one, name one migrant group that came to Britain between 1750 and 1900. What period is that? We'll do hands up. Alex? It's not. 1750 to 1900. Go on, Amara. Yeah, absolutely. It's the industrial period. Yeah, absolutely. So there are loads, aren't they? I think the obvious one which came to my mind when I was thinking about this was empire migrants. We've spoken about a lot, haven't we? But you could talk about Russian Jews or Russian Jewish migrants. You might talk about Germans. You could also talk about Italians, couldn't you? Barrel organ boys, Italian ice cream sellers, gelato. Yeah, there's loads of stuff there. One example of a migrant group who were invited to England before 1500. If it's before 1500, what time period is that? Go on. It is, yeah, well done. It is medieval, well done. So, and again, there's an obvious few here, isn't there? You could talk about Jews, again. You could talk about Flemish migrants. You might talk also about Italian bankers. Helpful squeaky shuffler along the corridor. So these questions will always be kind of 1 or 2 word answers, maybe occasionally a little bit more like Jacob's answer. You're not trying to write a full sentence usually. Get in and out. We're going to spend maximum of 3 minutes. Can you jot this down, please? We're going to spend maximum of 3 minutes on this question. But if you can do it in less than that, for example, some of my year 11s do all 3 of them in 1 minute, get them done, move on. And you've bagged yourself 2 minutes for later on, okay? You're banking yourself time, basically. So, the second question, which then you're going to see on the exam, number 2, will always ask you this in the migrants bit, to write a clear and organised summary that analyses something. In this case, it's asking you to analyse the different experience of migrants since 1900. So again, we're talking about the modern period, okay? And I'd always start to make notes for yourself like that as you're reading through these. And of course, we're going to bug it. So the B of bug stands for box, and we're going to box the action words. Write a clear and organised summary that analyzes, and I'm going to support it with examples, right? And then I'm just going to go and underline any keywords that I've got. Different experiences of migrants since 1900. Okay, so again, I'm just reminding myself so that I can do the G of bug and glance back at this, and just, I've got a quick reminder of what I'm going to talk about. Now, in your exam, and this is kind of the reason why we're writing this in our green books as well, because in your exam, you're going to have a question paper like this with all the questions on it. It will look almost identical to this actually, and a separate answer booklet with writing lines in it. The reason for that is that's what it's going to be like in your exam next year. Okay, so we're trying to simulate that as closely as possible so you can get like used to it and see what it's like. Now, what that means is, and this is really important, that when you are answering these questions, so we would have already done 1A, B and C by this point, and we're now starting to do question 2, those question numbers aren't going to be listed in your answer booklet. So you're going to need to write out the questions number that you're answering, and there'll be a margin, and you just do that in the margin, okay, or on the edge of the paper. So I just go 1A, and then I write my answer, 1B, I think we did this with the Vikings earlier this year, write my answer, 1C, write my answer, and then, what's the matter? And then question 2, okay? I don't get it. And then question 2, right? Because I'm talking about question 2 now, okay? And all I would then do, thanks you two, what's really important is that you plan your answers, especially to these longer questions, okay? Because if you don't, you're not going to really know what you're doing. We're going to do that in a minute. Before we do that, let's talk about timings and sentence starters, okay? So on question 2, you're going to spend in total 10 minutes. Jot that down, please. So that means we're going to spend 5 minutes on each paragraph, because you are going to write 2 paragraphs, okay? All right? I would jot this information down on your question paper. We'll do the plan in your books, okay? And as you all know, our paragraphs follow our special who, what, when, where, and then in our final sentence, a why, okay? Who, what, when, where, why. Who, what, when, where, why. You want to get 4 or 5 facts in your who, what, when, where, and then a reason why people are migrating, or perhaps a reason why people are treated badly, or a reason why people choose to do certain jobs when they migrate to Britain. All right? So who, what, when, where, why. Always be thinking that with this question. All right. Let's go ahead and plan something then. Hold on. True Blue Peter style. I'm going to copy one that I made earlier. I suppose you're all a bit too young for Blue Peter though, which is sad for people born in the 90s like me. So I'm going to know I need 2 paragraphs. So I'm going to quickly plan this by jotting down, first of all, my topic for each paragraph. And my first one is going to be on Belgian refugees. My second one, I think I could write a pretty cracking paragraph here about Commonwealth migrants. Remember, that's after 1948. And then underneath that, to help me, so I can again do the G, a bug right, glance back at my answer, I'm just going to jot down a couple of facts. Not out in full, but just quick reminders for me about what I'm going to use as my who, what, when, where, whys. Okay? So, Belgian refugees, I know they are invited during World War One. WW1 stands for World War One, okay? Jot this down with me in your book so you've got a good example. Everything I write, you write, thanks. I know that it was the largest amount of refugees ever welcomed to Britain? And I know that they start to arrive in 1914, roughly, after the invasion of Belgium by Germany. So right at the start of the war, really. And I also know that they're treated well until the end of the war, or the end of World War One, WW1 again, I'm writing in notes, right, when they are sent back. And I think that's where I'm going to bring my why in, right? Why are they sent back? Well, they're sent back because the war's finished, but they're also sent back because they don't need the Belgians to do jobs anymore because the soldiers are coming back from the war, right? So why the war, or World War One, is over and soldiers are coming home to take back their jobs. You might not in the exam write a plan as detailed as that. I've written a more detailed one, so we've got a really good example. But you probably want to spend maximum 1 minute doing your plan. So you don't want to spend too long, okay? Alright, so that's my first paragraph. I'm going to quickly jot down some notes from Commonwealth migrants as well. Now, I reckon the first sort of little story that I'm going to talk about with Commonwealth migrants is obviously the arrival of the Empire Windrush. In 1948. And I might talk about the Commonwealth and Citizens Act. Or the Commonwealth Citizens Act, sorry. Which was also in 1948, right? Which gave those people, countries that were in the Commonwealth, the right to come to Britain because they had passports, British passports, of course. Again, these are all details I'd add to my paragraph that as I was writing, but I don't need to put them on my plan because I'm trying to do this quickly. I might then add that more came from the Caribbean and India. There obviously were other Commonwealth countries, Nigeria, Ghana, things as countries that joined the Commonwealth as well, but these are the ones I'm going to focus on. More came from the Caribbean and India, and that led to tensions. And then I think I'm going to might talk about why that leads to tensions or the consequences of that, right? That's going to be my whys. And I'm not going to write this down in full. I'm just going to jot down a reminder to myself that the last thing I'm going to talk about in my why is Notting Hill riots in 1958 and why they happened. All right? Remember, in this question 2, our summary question, right? We're just describing, really. The most explanation we do is a why, explaining why something's happened or why people are doing things. It's a nice, easy question, this one. If you can manage to do it in under 10 minutes, brilliant. Bank in time for the bigger questions later on. All right, once you've finished, everyone go and bug question 3, please, on your own. Once you're finished, everyone go and bug question 3, please, on your own. Again, if you're finished, go and bug question 3, please, on your own. Don't know why that's going off. How bizarre. All right, are we ready? I'm going to assume we are. Put your hand up if you, again, you don't mind your voice being potentially in the video. I'm just going to ask somebody what you bugged. No, that's fine. I'll show you. All right. So in this question, you should, if it were me, this is what I would have bugged, right? I would have boxed what was, because that's my action word. It's asking me to tell what it was. I need to support my answer with examples. I also would have boxed that. And it's asking me about the experience of migrants arriving in Britain from 1500 to 1750. Okay, nice, easy question. I can talk about lots here, can't I? I'm most often probably going to be talking about how different groups' experiences were quite varied. They were different at different times, right? Okay, so again, I'm going to come to my answer booklet. I'm going to put number 3 on the side of the page. It's really important you do that. In the exam in the summer, next summer, if you don't write the numbers in the corner, then they will not mark that question. And you could write a brilliant answer, and they won't mark it, because they will say that they don't know what question it's for. So it's really important you remember to do that, and we get in the habit of doing that now, which is why we're going to have an answer booklet in our mocks, okay? And then again, I'm just going to quickly write a sort of quick plan for you, so that you could have a good idea of what you might write if you were answering this question. And I'm going to write, sorry, we should have spoke first of all, shouldn't we, about how you're going to answer this. This question, you're going to write 2 claim paragraphs. Just jot this down for me, year 10. This question, you're going to write 2 claim paragraphs, okay? That means we're going to spend 12 minutes in total, so 6 minutes per paragraph, all right? And I would really encourage you to time your paragraphs, not the overall time for the question, because you'll find 6 minutes goes very, very quickly. All right? And you're going to use the claim paragraph structure, right? So you'll use, in this, for this example, you might use one group's experience was, my evidence for this is, and then you might use an extra thing, right, a conjunction to put more evidence in, furthermore, or something like that, from the vocab map. And then you're going to explain, right? And the basic ones we use to explain, of course, are this means that, this also means that, therefore. But lots of you should be aiming to upgrade that by swapping out these words for words from the vocab map. As long as you're explaining in 3 sentences, that's absolutely fine to swap those words out, all right? So that's how we're going to answer it, structure-wise. Let's give you 30 seconds to make sure you got that jotted down. Let's go back to thinking about some answers you could write. So if I were doing this, again, I'm looking for 2 paragraphs, right? I think I would write 1 paragraph on handsome migrants. Now, I know that's a group that we skimped over a bit because you did it when I was off, so let's talk about it now. Handsome migrants are part of something called the Hanseatic League, which is a trading company from Germany. And they start to migrate to Britain actually in the medieval period, but lots more come in the early modern times, which of course is what this is asking us about, right? 1500 to 1750 is the early modern period for us. And they are coming because they're actually invited as traders to open up kind of markets and trading across northern Europe, across Germany. And they end up settling in a trading community in a place called the Steel Yard, which is in what is today East London, okay? And their experience as a result is pretty positive, but there are some negative experiences as well. So I'm just going to jot down some ideas about this, right? So I might say, well, Hansa migrants or Hansas were German traders, concentrate please, everything I write you write, who were invited. They set up shop in the Steel Yard in London. They also settle in other places. King's Lynn, thanks boys. King's Lynn is a big Hansa community that develops there too. That's in the east of England. They set up in the Steel Yard in London and are successful because they make money, okay? They become very wealthy. Now, as a result of them becoming wealthy, some people, especially in London, become quite resentful towards the Hansa migrants. And so we might say that their experiences varied because in 1517 they are actually attacked, and the Steel Yard is attacked too during Evil May Day. It's known as the Evil May Day, okay? Remember, everything I write, you write, please. So if I was writing a paragraph on this, well, that would be my evidence, right? And then I'd be saying, well, the experience, therefore, the experience of Hansa migrants was varied, since they were often successful financially. This also means that their experience in some cases was negative because of examples like the Evil May Day, when several Hansas were murdered during the attacks and the Steel Yard was severely vandalised. Therefore, the experience of Hansa migrants was actually quite varied, given they're treated differently by different people at different times. Okay, that's the sort of paragraph I might be writing here. All right. But I need another paragraph, right? Now, another nice group I think I can write about is the case of the poor Palatines, who were German refugees. We read about these the other day, didn't we? Now again, their experience is varied, right? When they arrive, people think they are Protestants. And so people help them. In fact, people and the government help the poor Palatines. The government set up a whole kind of camp, really, almost like a town of tents in a place called Blackheath. It's a great big park. It's even a big park today. And the poor Palatines live or stay in those tents. People visit the poor Palatines and give them money, because people think they're Protestant migrants, a bit like the Huguenots, and that they're going to be successful if Britain helps them. Only they quickly learn that the poor Palatines, most of them are not Protestants at all, and most of them are pretty unskilled, at least in skills that Britain wants at the time. Britain's got loads of farmers, and the poor Palatines are all farmers. So people stop giving the poor Palatines help. They start to see them as a problem. In fact, even the government does. And so, later in that same year, they arrive in 1709. Later in the same year, in 1709, 5,000 are deported by the government. That means they're sent, are deported back to Germany. Now that left roughly about 3,000 or 4,000. Some of them sort of make their own way to America or make their own way back to Germany. But also, in 1710, the government deports the final 3,000 to America. All right? Which, of course, in 1710 was actually a British colony. It was part of the British Empire. So if it were me, those would be my 2 paragraphs, right? And I'll be writing explanations about how their experiences were varied. They're not all the same all the time. So at this point, I'm getting through my paper. I've broken the back of it, really. And the last question that you're going to look at, or we're going to look at today, is question 4 or 5. Now remember that you only answer one of those questions. If we've got time today, I'll plan one with you for both, just so we've seen some different ideas. But just you remember that in the exam, you only answer one of question 4 or 5. Do not answer both. The examiner will pick one to answer. That means that when I'm marking your papers this summer, I will pick one to answer if you've done both. And just to prove a point, I will pick the one that you did worst and you got the worst mark on. To prove the point that you should not answer both questions. You're not being clever, you're just wasting time. All right, you all ready? Give back, just Alex, you've got about 10 seconds or so, then we're going to crack on and look at 4 and 5. Go back to your test paper for me then. And then let's just make some notes in this big space at the bottom about how we're going to answer question 4 and 5. Okay? Now it varies depending on what level you're aiming for. So write down the one which is relevant to you. If you are aiming for a level 8 or 9, then you're going to write an intro, and that is literally one sentence. I agree or I disagree with the view that, because that is it. One sentence, spend 1 minute on it, absolute maximum. Once you've done an intro, if you're aiming for a level 8 or 9, you're going to write 4 claim paragraphs. I won't write out the structure again because it's the same structure as above. Apart from, what I will write is that you're going to use on one hand, and you can just jot this down as well, please, on the other hand, as your sentence starters at the head of each paragraph. Some people often ask me, sir, does that mean I use on one hand, on the other hand in all 4 paragraphs? No. The first one, for one side, you use on one hand, then any other paragraphs, you start them with something else. Furthermore, in addition, as well as this, likewise, conversely. Okay? So an intro, 4 claim paragraphs, and a conclusion, please. If you are aiming for a level 6/7, you're going to write an intro. Remember, that is 1 minute. You're going to write 3 claim paragraphs. And I won't write it out again because you can see it right there already, but you're again going to use on one hand, on the other hand. And that is it. You don't need a conclusion. You only need a conclusion if you're aiming for a level 8 or 9. Okay? If you're aiming for a level 4/5, and no one is aiming for below that, please, then you're going to write an intro. Again, this is only 1 minute. 1 minute. Thank you. And you're going to write 2 claim paragraphs. All right? Stop talking, thanks. Put the moisturiser away, you don't need it. All right. Thanks. How are you gonna? Oh, sorry. Let's talk about timings. So in this, on this paper, this question, sorry, you're going to spend about 28 minutes in total on this question. If you're aiming for a level 8 or 9, you're going to have to write really fast. That means because you've just about got enough time within the 28 minutes to plan it. Write an intro, conclusion, and 4 paragraphs. How are we going to do that? Well, like we've already said, the intro is 1 minute maximum. If you can do it in less than that, great. Your paragraphs, you're going to spend 6 minutes on each one. And that should leave you with, including a minute for planning, that should leave you with about 3 minutes, if you're aiming for a level 9, for a conclusion. All right? If we've got time, we'll write out some sentence starters for your conclusion. But I want to crack on and plan them, because worst case scenario, I'll just send them to you in an email, okay, with the sentence starters for you. So we'll see how it goes. If we've got time at the end, we'll write out some conclusion sentence starters as well. All right? So write down the one of these that's relevant to you, please. Yeah, go on. No, just one conclusion. So it's at the end. You're just saying overall, what's your view? Okay. Go on. Oh, sorry, I thought I was wrong. Everyone ready? Brilliant. Right, let's plan some of these then. I'm going to do question 4 and question 5 with you, depending on time. Concentrate, please, you two. Concentrate, please. So, question 4. In fact, let's have a look at the question first. We haven't done that, have we? Question 4 asks you, or says, attitudes towards migrants in Britain change. So I'm going to underline attitudes change between 1250 and 1750. Notice, this is 2 time periods. This is medieval. Remember, the only time you ignore the dates is with medieval. We can go back to 1066. Pick up sticks. And this is early modern. These questions often will do this. The 18 markers, the final questions, will often ask you about 2 time periods at the same time. All right? And it's asking me, how far do I agree? And it's asking me to give reasons. All right? Now, we are going to plan this like we plan them in lessons, because it's the quickest, most efficient way of doing it, which means you're going to draw yourselves a pie chart, okay? Now, if I'm aiming for a level 9, so I'm going to have 4 paragraphs. However, concentrate for me. Everything I write, you write. Start to draw your pie chart for us. However, because I'm aiming for a level 9, I know that means I'm not going to have a balanced answer. I'm not going to have 2 paragraphs on one side, 2 on the other. I'm going to have 3 and 1. 3 paragraphs are what I think, and 1 paragraph as a counter argument. If I want a level 9, I need to do that, okay? So I need to show I've got a strong argument. All right? So I'm going to actually disagree with this statement, because I think that actually, Pierre, can you do us a favour? Just close that door so we're blocking out the music department. We don't have those on our lovely YouTube video. Thanks very much. What was I saying? I'm actually going to disagree with this statement and say that, well, attitudes to migrants, I don't think have changed across this period. And the first way I'm going to do that in my first paragraph is by saying that with skilled and wealthy migrants, attitudes don't change. If migrants are wealthy and have skills that the British people want, then they are welcomed. And because it's asking me about 2 time periods, medieval and early modern, I'm going to need to give some examples from both of those. All right? So the examples that if it were me, I'd be talking about, and you can go off and revise these on your own and think about the facts you'd use, but I'd be talking about Flemish migrants, specifically weavers and brewers. Yeah, they're treated badly at different times, like in the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, but the reason they're treated badly is because they're successful, because the people don't like them, or some people in London don't like them, so they attack them. They're still successful, they're still welcomed, especially by the king. In fact, they're invited twice, in the 1270s and in 1330s. Similarly, I might also talk about Hansa migrants. Their story's really similar, right? They're mainly coming in the early modern period. They're traders, they're bringing money, they're bringing skills, and they're generally welcomed, until of course they're not when they're expelled by Elizabeth I in 1590. But for the purpose of our argument, we're going to omit that for the time being. Okay? Of course, I could also talk here about Huguenots as well. And I think that will be plenty for me to talk about in this paragraph. All right? I need you to stop. I need you to spin round and write everything that I write and not talk over me. Thanks. So, nice easy paragraph. Similarly, I think I can write a paragraph about how unskilled, poor migrants, similarly, attitudes towards them don't change because they are not welcomed. And again, I've got loads and loads of examples of this, especially in the early modern period. So I might talk about poor Palatines, like we just spoke about, who are arriving in 1709. I might also talk about how in the medieval period, well, Flemish migrants, when they first come in 1270, are expelled 1 month after they arrive by Henry III, because the ones that are come that are weavers he wants, but loads of Flemish migrants come who aren't weavers. It's not a skill, the skills they have are not skills that Britain wants at the time. So Henry III sends them back to Flanders. I might also talk here about gypsy migrants as well, who were expelled by Henry VIII. So again, there's loads of really nice things I can talk about here and make a really nice argument for myself. And I think kind of out of these, I can also make a fourth agree paragraph where I could talk about how there are attacks on successful migrant groups. So again, the attitudes don't change because look, every time a migrant group is successful, they end up being attacked by British people. And again, I've got loads of examples here. Flemish migrants are attacked at the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. We already said, didn't we, how Hansa migrants are attacked in Evil May Day in 1517. So these are migrant groups that are successful and they keep on being attacked because the attitudes don't change, because it turns some people against them if you do well and you are foreign. Yeah. Absolutely. Exactly. That's my other medieval example, right? We can talk about how Jews are attacked because they are successful moneylenders. And they're attacked over and over again, right? In 1190 at Clifford's Tower. They're also attacked during Simon de Montfort's civil war in the 1260s. Remember we spoke about Licoricia of Winchester in the Winchester jury and it being attacked. They're attacked because they're successful. And that means that some English people don't like them because they're too good. They're coming over here, stealing our jobs, stealing our women. The story never changes, right? But because I'm aiming for a level 9, I also want a counter argument here because I need to show I can do that, okay? And so I think I could argue that attitudes do change in some ways. And there's a really important point of change here, a turning point. Because in 1535, Britain, or rather England at the time, becomes Protestant. And after that point, Britain begins to welcome, or welcomes, Protestant migrants. And of course, the best example of that is the Huguenot migrants. I'm running out of space here. But obviously, I've got other examples like I spoke about before. The poor Palatines are another really lovely example here because at first they're welcomed because the English or British by then are fooled into thinking that the poor Palatines are in fact Protestants. Turns out they're not. And not all of them are, and lots of them as a result are expelled. So we could say that, well, attitudes do change because, especially in 1535, when England becomes a Protestant country under Henry VIII's Reformation, well, that leads to Protestant migrants then being welcomed. All right, we haven't got time to go through question 5. So what I'm going to do is I'll do another little video and see if I can edit them, splice them together and send it out for you, going through that one for you as well. But hopefully that was useful, and you can start to get packed up.